Okay, so pretty much yesterday what we were seeing is from how do you just basically run one simple job, right? And we saw how do you specify something on a particular place. Okay, so now before moving further, let's take one by one. So what will happen sometimes is that you might have to pass some kind of parameter to the job, because until now, if you see what will happen, if you say build now, it will just proceed with doing the job, whatever that you have specified. I mean, logically build in the sense it's not going to do a build, whatever that you have specified inside it, it will do. But and sometimes what will happen is you need to give some kind of choices. So choices in the sense, okay, now if I say do this, if you want, you might do this, or if you want, you might do something else. So in that case, there must be some user interaction between the user and the Jenkins job. So in that case, if you want to have some parameters to be run, then how do we do it will be the question. So in that case, we have something called as build as parameterized. Okay, so if you see this option, there are a lot of ways wherein you can pass the parameter. So parameter in the sense, what kind of parameters that you want. Suppose, do you want to pass it as a string parameter, or do you want to store everything in one file and pass it to it so that when Jenkins run, it will try to read that file, take the content, whatever that you have put into it, and specify that these are the options to be passed to the jobs. Okay, so like that, you have so many options that we can do. Okay, so one thing what I'll try to show you is like we can have a text or string. It's just for demo, so that will be clear for you. So for example, say that I'll give, I'll say parameter 1. Okay, and fine. So it is asking me what is the default value that it should take. Suppose if you don't want to pass any values, and if you still want to press enter, then whatever is the default value that you have given, it will proceed with that. Okay, so I'll say, okay, something like that. Fine. And if you want to give some description, you can give a description. If not, you can leave. So like this, you can add as many parameters that you want. And when you pass it, and when you try to go back to the job and build, it will ask to enter the value for this parameter. Okay, just see how it works. If I apply and save, and now if you see, the build now went away. Okay, until now we were seeing only it was build now. But now if you see, since you have a parameter option that you have given, it is saying build with parameters. That is because it will not proceed with doing the build. So literally you have to pass some options. So what is that? And if you click it now, if you see, it is asking us to give a value for this parameter of name param1. And as I said, by default, it is giving this value. If you want, you can overwrite and put something else. And then if you click build, it will proceed with doing the build, whatever that you have set. Okay, but the question again comes now that we are passing some value, but how are we going to use it? Because we have not used it. So how will we use it? So in order to use all these parameters, what happens is that any value that you try to put it up as a parameter, it will be stored as an environment variable in the respective system. So wherever this master Jenkins is running, right, it will be storing the environment variable called param1 with the value what you're storing. Okay, so how do you retrieve that value? So to retrieve the value, it depends on which OS that you're running this master Jenkins on. So for that, if you see in Windows, how will you get the, okay, any idea? How do you get the environment variable value? So if it is Windows, then you use percentage some environment variable like this. Okay, so it will return the value of the environment variable what you have stored. So the same thing, if it is Unix, then you have to give a dollar. So right now it will not show because it is a Windows. Suppose if you have installed Jenkins and in the production, if you're working on a Unix-based operating system or a Linux-based operating system, then you have to use dollar and the environment variable so that it will return you whatever values that you have stored in that environment variable. So in the same case here, now if you see, we have stored what a environment variable called param1 and some value inside it. So in order to get that, what you can simply do is you can just get the same value. And now if you say our first is, I can say simply, since it's a Windows, I can say param1, whatever that we have specified there. Okay. And now if I apply this, so whatever values that you're trying to pass, it will be stored as an environment variable, and the same thing would be taken over to the build step, wherein it will be replacing that value with the whatever value that you have given during runtime. Okay, so now if you just say testing, and if you do a build, it will complete. Okay, now if you go and see here, it is replacing this value. So like this, you can actually use the parameters from the user so that if you want something to be changed in a different way in a default behavior, there might be some scenarios where you have to do. So in those cases, you can change it by passing the parameters like this. And it is not limited to only one parameter. You can have multiple parameters wherein you can pass some options. Okay, suppose say that you want to give a choice parameter wherein there might be some multiple values. Suppose if you're doing a build and you might try to do the build in the same way for multiple products. Suppose if you want to choose which product or which subcomponent of the product, then there might be some option to keep. So in that case, what you can do, you can use a option or a parameter called choice parameter and you can do it. Okay, let me say some components. Okay, then I'll say component 1, component 2, component 3, component 4. Okay, so now whatever values that you choose will be stored in this variable called components. So now in order to get this value, you simply have to use the same thing. Okay, so I'll say the same. I'll say our second parameter is components. Okay, fine. Let's save this. And now if I go again and build with parameters, so first one is you're getting the value, and second, if you see, you'll get a drop down box wherein you can choose with those options what you can give. Okay, so in this, if I choose something and do a build, if you go, you see, you'll be getting the values correspondingly with those environment variables. Okay, so this is how, suppose if you have some values that you have to pass as a parameter, so instead of running it on default values, if you want to have some options given to the user so that he can pick and run basically, then you can have this option called build with parameters. Are you guys getting it? Hello? Yeah, I'll show one. When I go through the continuous integration step, I'll show you one Maven build. Okay, so in that I'll show you exactly how you can pass the options so that you will understand a little better. So for now, you're getting it right. So whatever parameters that you give option to the user, that will be stored as a environment variable, and that can be accessed using the corresponding operating system, however you will access, that is percentage variable percentage for Windows, and if it's Unix, then you just say simply dollar and the environment variable name. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, so fine. Now once we have done this, now let's move on to the next part. Okay, so until now we were running the builds. Okay, I'll just remove it. Because why I'm removing this, because if you give this, then the build will not happen unless and until you pass the parameters. Okay, uh, going ahead. Now let's not come to the SCM part. Okay, now let's go to the build trigger part. So when you say build trigger part, why do you need build triggers is, until now we didn't specify when exactly we have to run the build, because we were doing the build on demand basis, which means whenever I click the button build now or build with parameters, it was trying to build, right? So in case if you don't want the user to keep clicking and automatically it should run specified on a specified time, right? Then how it should be running. So that is the similarity between cron jobs what you have in Unix. So just like scheduler which you have in Windows, there is something called as cron jobs. And as I was telling you in the very first class about Jenkins, right? What is cron server? So if you want to schedule something in Unix, what you have to do is you have to create an entry with respect to what job you're running, and you have to specify when you are going to run. Okay, so in the same concept here, we have a similarity wherein Jenkins will also take something similar to cron job entry, wherein if you specify this is what you have to run and this is when you have to run, it will do. But since it is not a cron, you don't have to tell exactly what you have to run, because internally this is the job which you have to run. So the first part remains. That means the syntax of whatever that you're going to say here on what time that you have to run will be same as cron job. Okay, so let's go through that. So in order to use it, you have to use this option called build periodically. And when you say build periodically, it will give you an option wherein you have to choose when you have to keep. Okay, now coming to this point. So when you say, especially on a particular date and time that you want to do, what and all values that you can give and how is that you have to give. Okay, so in Jenkins, normally, suppose if you don't understand anything and if you need more description about it, please go ahead and click the question mark next to it so that it will give you some detailed description about what that is. Okay, so I'm going to use the same because it is going to help us in describing how to use this value, and this is the same thing what you will be doing when you're trying to edit a cron server or a cron job entry in any Linux or Unix system. Okay, so now, so if you see, basically in order to specify a job when you have to run, you have to specify 5 values. Okay, so what are those 5 values? So there are 5 space differentiated values that you have to give. That means 5 columns. So you have to give like this, something like this. You have to give 5 values. So based on those 5 values, it will be picking up when it has to run automatically and it will be running it by default. Okay, so in that case, what are the 5 values that you have to give? Okay, so basically if you see, that is nothing but the time when you have to run. Okay, so the first column or the first value what you're going to specify is the minute. So minute in the sense, what minute of the hour that you want to run. Okay, so say an example that you want to run this job every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes. So based on that, you have to pass the value on when it has to run. Or if you say that I want to run this job exactly at 6:30. Okay, so that means what is the minute that you have to run? It is 30, right? So simply you can say 30 here, wherein the value for the minute varies or it ranges from 0 to 59, whereas 0 is the first minute and the last minute goes to 59. And suppose if you want to run exactly on 30th minute, then you can simply say it as 30th minute. Okay, now in case if you don't want and if you want to separately give some other time, then you can simply say that time. So if you say 10 here, that means it is going to run exactly on the 10th minute of whatever hour that we are going to specify. Okay, so the first column specifies, or the first value specifies on what minute that you want to run. Okay, Fine. So once you have done, then the next column or the next value is the hour. So when you say hour, so which hour of the day that you want to run? Okay, so now you just said it has to be run at 10th minute of some hour, but which hour you need to tell, right? Because in a day we have 24 hours, and that means you literally have 24 times the 10th minute. So out of that, which hour or which 10th minute of the hour you need to run. So basically you have to choose a value between 0 to 23 of the hour and say exactly at that point of time you want to run. So for example, like I said, I want to run exactly on 6 o'clock 10 minutes. So if that's the case, you simply say the hour as 06. So now this means at exactly 6 o'clock and 10 minutes, it will be running. Okay, wherein if you see, this is put it in a 24-hour format. So when you say 06, it doesn't mean that 06 will take for both AM and PM. This means it is a AM, 6 o'clock. Wherein if it goes for PM, then it has to be 18. Okay, so that will vary between the hours. So based on that, you have to choose a value when you have to run exactly. Now, this would run exactly at 6 o'clock and 10th minute of 6 o'clock. Okay, now the next one, what you see is month. So now you're saying that you want to run this on this hour and this minute, that is fine. But which day of the month you have to run? So suppose you have 30 days in a month, right? 31 logically. But out of this, do you want to run it only on a specific day, or do you want to run it on multiple days, or whatever it is? So like that, what you have to choose is you have to choose on a day when you have to exactly run. Okay, so now in that case, if you see, if you're interested to run this every day, because I don't want to run it once in a month, right? So in that case, what you need to do is you can choose some value between 1 to 31st. Based on that, it will trigger only on that. Yes, space is a separation which will tell you that the first value is for minute and the second value is for hour, because if you join and put it together, it doesn't make a sense. So like I said, there are 5 values which will be separated by a space. Okay. Okay, now, so there is one option wherein if you want, you can specify the date. Okay, so say assume that I want to run it only on the second day of the month. That means whenever the month day is 2, then I want to run. So now it will run only on the second day of the month at 6 o'clock 10 minutes. Okay, now similarly, we still have few more things. That is, are you interested to run on a particular month, or do you want to happen everything on the same month? So that is what the fourth column or the value that you have to specify, wherein you need to specify which month of the year you want to run. Okay, so in that case, the value varies from 1 to 12, which will specify whether you want to run on January, February, March, or whatever. Based on that, you have to choose a value. Suppose here, if I say 01, that means it is going to run only on January 02nd, 6 o'clock, 10th minute. Okay, and finally, the last value what you see is day of the week. So if you say what is this day of the week, suppose if you are interested to run this anywhere specifically on only some day of the week, that is only I need to run it on Monday to Tuesday, I don't want to run it on any other day. So in that case, you can choose. Suppose if I say it to be like 0, then Monday. So that means only when January 2nd lies on what? Monday, it will be working. If not, it will not be working. Okay, so like this, you can specify a value with respect to these 5, that is minute, hour, day of the month, and day of the week. Okay, but if you see closely, it is not the right way exactly to give, because if you want to run something, you need to run it periodically every day. Then what will you do? So they have multiple options for this. In that case, what do you mean by multiple options is, suppose if you don't want to run it on a specific time, and if you want to choose all the values for that. Okay, now coming to this one by one. Say that I don't want to run only on the second day. I want to run this on every day. That means come to the third. What is this? This is the one. So I want to run from first day to 31st day. That means I have to choose all the values. So in order to choose all the values, you can choose like this, wherein you can specify comma and you can say like this. Okay, now if you keep saying like this, it is going to be too big, wherein you have to give all the 31 values. So instead of that, what you can do is you can simply specify a star, wherein star specifies that all the values for this column. So what is the column here? That is the third column, right? So what is the third column? Day. So when you say star, it matches all the values. So that means for every day of the month, it will be working. Okay, then the second thing after that is month. Do you want to run it only on January? If you leave like this, then it will do for only January. So for only January month, what it will do is it will run for every day of January. Suppose if you don't want January and you want to run it for every month, because that is what you'll be doing in production, you'll be running it on 24/7 every day and every month of the day. So here, once again, if you say star, then that means you are going to run on every value for this. That is every month of the year, that is January to December, you will be running. And finally, if you want something specifically here, you can run. If not, you can simply say star here also. Or say that you want to run it only on a weekdays, then there are two values that you can specify. So if you specify star, it will take all the values. If not, you can simply say like this, wherein it will run only on the 1 to 5th day of the week. That is Monday to Friday it will run. So if you want, you can specify it in this way. If not, simply what you can do is you can say it in one more way, wherein it will take a range. So if you say like this, it will take a range wherein it will run from first day of the week to 5th day of the week. Okay, so for now, for testing, I'll specify it as star here. Okay, now we have done like this. Now, if you leave it, now what does this mean? This means that is job should run every day of the week, every month of the year, every day of the month, and 6 o'clock and 10th minute. Okay, suppose if you don't even have to say, and you can simply go ahead and say star. And if you say star, this will run every day, every 10th minute of the hour. Okay, so like this you can specify. And what will happen if I now simply say this star here also? What does it mean? So when I say star on the first column, what is the first column? It is minute. So what is it going to represent? What does it represent? The first value represents minute, right? So if I say star, it is going to match. Yes, so it is going to run every minute, every hour, every day. Okay, so you have to be careful when you're giving this, because if you say star 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 by mistake, then it is going to take every minute and run. But for demo, I'm going to use it so that only then you would know exactly how it is running. If not, what will happen? We have to wait for 5 to 10 minutes just to run one job. Okay, so I can specify it like this. So now let's see what will happen. Now let's say apply, save, and for your information, I have removed the parameters. Why? Because if I give parameters, even though the job runs on every minute, it will not proceed because it will wait for us to input the value. So that is the reason I have removed it for the demo, just to have a good understanding. Okay, now once you have done this, okay, we don't want these values. Okay, let me just put some other statement. I'm running. Okay, fine. So now if you wait and see, automatically for every 1 minute, this job would be running, wherein you have two options. That is, if you want, still you can click on the build now, and that will forcibly trigger a build on need basis. If not, if you leave every 1 minute, automatically the job will be triggering. Okay, so let's just wait for some time and see it will trigger. So you can see it is 9. It should go ahead with 10 in some time.
Okay, I have a question, sir.
Yes, Anup.
Sir, actually, I want to ask a question that if this trigger have started now for the every 1 minute, so now I want to stop it. How?
Go back and remove
Because
the
I,
job. That's it. The entry in the job. It'll remove it. See, now exactly at 1 minute it has triggered, right?
yes,
I'll
yes.
show you 1 minute. Wait. So let's wait for one more minute and it will trigger it once again. So it's almost agreeing at 45th second, right? So let's wait for one more minute. The job will run once again. And if you see, it is completed running at exactly some time of 1 minute what you have run, right? So just wait for one more minute and it will trigger it once again.
Yeah, yeah, Adam.
Hey,
Hello.
yeah,
Yeah, I have one doubt on parameterized build.
yeah, Nagesh.
Yeah, can you show me? We have so many options in parameterized build.
Yeah, one second. I'll just come.
Yeah, can you please explain the file parameter? How to use that file parameter?
Okay, one second. Yeah, I'll come to it. Okay, so now if you see, you have automatically it is running. Suppose if you don't want to continue with this, then simply go back and remove this option. Okay, wherein if you just remove this, that's it. It will not run periodically. Now if I click this, it will not trigger the build periodically or it will not run it automatically unless and until you click this, it will not go ahead and build. Getting that, Anup? Okay, coming
Yeah, yeah.
to the parameters. Okay, so if you see here, so this file parameter has some options that you have to pass. Okay, so like I said, we'll have a better. So this will say that wherever that you specify a file, so it will automatically read it and whatever the values that you have given into it will be taken into consideration. Suppose say that you have stored some file and you have put some values inside it, you can give all those values. Say that I have something like this. Okay, and
We are specifying this file in workspace or some other location.
it is not workspace. It is somewhere outside which is present on your system. So what will happen,
Okay, sure.
say that you are running some kind of job. Okay, now instead of asking the user every time to run, there might be some scenarios wherein you need to do something based on some other job. So in that case, what you can do is like the build or testing and all, what you will do, you will use some kind of version information or all those things. So wherein that will be automatically generated this value. So this values will not be put by us manually. So in that case, what you can do is you can put a link to this in such a way so that this file will be getting generated automatically by some other system so that whenever this job runs, it will take the value from this and run based on that. So pretty much you can do anything like what you want. So the only thing is rather than passing the values manually, if you want to do it in this way, then you can specify a file wherein it will read the content of the file and it will take the values from that and it will work based on that.
But till now, I'm not using this parameter. That's why I'm asking.
No, no, that's what, see, it's just an option. It's not like every time you will be using, and please understand it's all on the need basis because you will not be using
Okay.
100% everything. It's all depends on the need because every company, every user will have its own requirement. So what we are trying to see is almost trying to go through every options that is available. So based on that, you can play around with all those things. That is what the only thing is if your understanding is good with the basics, then you can go around and play around whenever you have some requirement. Based on that, you can work on it. So it's nothing like if you have this, you have to choose. If not, you don't have to choose. Even pretty much, I have never used this build by parameters until now. But if there is some requirement, you might have to do. That is the only thing. But other than that, it's not like that. And here, there is one more option. Okay, suppose if you don't want this job at all to be running, then simply you can disable. So when you disable this job itself will not run. Okay, simply there is another way that you can do, because suddenly you're running and you don't want this to run for some reason. Maybe say that it is not working properly, or it is failing. Then simply you can just go and choose that option to disable, and it'll not work. And in case whenever you want to enable, you go back to this option and enable, or you can directly use this enable option that will enable it. Okay, and the same way you have the option to disable also. So if you don't know, you can simply go here and choose this option. Okay, fine. So now we were seeing pretty much from how do we pass a parameter, how do we run it periodically, that we were seeing all those things. Okay, now let's go to continuous integration, which is the important, and that is when we will be working with the SCM. Or what is exactly meant by continuous integration? Whenever a developer checks in, automatically we should be doing a build and trying to check something based on what the requirement is. So in that case, we need to periodically check with some content in the SCM tool, and based on that we have to say whether this is going to work or whether this is not going to work, or whatever it is. Okay, so only when there is a change that has been submitted by the developer into the Git repository, we should be able to run this job. If not, it should not be able to run. Okay, so in that case, the first thing what we need to do is we need to first set up a continuous integration job. So when I say continuous integration job, there is nothing specific about it. The only thing what you need to do is, first thing, you need to set up the source code management details here, and then specifically you have to specifically say something about build triggers. Okay, so the first thing what we will do is we will go with the source code management, and since we have seen respectively from Git, I'm going to use the same thing. And okay, and for Git, what did we do? So we had one remote repository that we had created, right? So let me use that the same. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Okay, I don't still remember that. Let me check that quickly. Even I forgot. What is the name? Even. Okay, this is the one. So I have a Git repository that I've created in the GitHub. Okay, it's just for a demo I have, and it actually contains a small Maven-based Java project. It's nothing, actually there's no source code in it. It's just a dummy just for work basis I have put. Okay, so now if you see, I have put it like this. Okay, and where is this repository? And this is the repository URL where I can access. So now what I need to do is I need to try to access this repository. So what I'm trying to say is, assume that this is the central repository which is being shared by multiple users and people are working on it. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to check frequently whether there is any check-in or commit that is happening to this particular central repository. Okay, so for that, what we are going to do is first we are going to say where is your repository that is present, and after that, in case if you have any parameters to log in that you have access, then you have to specifically add it. And since I've already added it, I'm just not using it again. If not, you have to basically add. When you say add, it will ask you to enter the username and password that you have used for your GitHub. Okay, so now once you're done, it will be connecting to it. Okay, so now for the continuous integration, the first step we have done. What is that we have done? We have telling to the Jenkins job that please try to check this repository. Okay, so now when you're saying check this repository, we didn't tell when you have to check frequently, right? So do you want to check it frequently, or what is that you have to say? So for that, what we need to do is we need to tell the build triggers. But the difference between the build trigger is whenever you say build trigger, it will automatically go ahead and execute the job. But our requirement is not to execute the job, but our interest is to check only if there is a new check-in that is available into this repository. You should be proceeding with whatever build step that you have given. If not, you should not be doing. That is what continuous integration means, right? Only when there is a new check-in that has happened by the developer, you should proceed with doing some build step. If not, you should not be doing anything with that. So in that case, instead of giving build periodically, we should say poll SEM. Okay, so now this stands the same way as you have specified per build periodically, wherein you can specify how frequently you want to poll the data for the repository. So now I'm saying check for every 1 minute. Okay, so now what it will do is every 1 minute it will go to this repository and check whether there is a new check-in happened, and when there is a new check-in or commit that has happened, it will come here and it will proceed with doing the exact build step what you have given. Okay, so now if I say apply, all right, so now if you wait for some time, so this, since this is the first time that you have scheduled the data to be taken from the repository, for the first time it will proceed. Why? Because how will you compare between something and the repository? So how does the Jenkins job know that this is the last check-in that has happened in the Git repository? So for that, the very first time it will go ahead and do the build for the first time. So once it does the build, then it will store all the information about this repository, and then proceeding further, unless and until you don't have a new check-in that has been put into this repository, this will not proceed with the job. Okay, so now if you see, very first time it is proceeding, right?
Okay.
Okay, 2 minutes. So now if you see, it has proceeded. Basically, you forget about this because it is just trying to sync the data, and after that, whatever that data you have given, it is working. Okay, now let's go back to the job and see. Now if you see, it has a polling log. Okay, now it says that what was the change? The last change that you have committed here is B25C, and if you go to the repository, it is the last commit. Okay, now it has synced the Jenkins job or the Jenkins repository with the same thing as that of your Git repository. But going further, unless until you don't do a submit into this repository, it will not be proceeding with doing anything. So for every 1 minute, it will be pulling the data, and as soon as it finds a new check-in, it will do. If not, it will be waiting until a new check-in has been submitted. Okay, so this is what pretty much we'll be doing in the continuous integration. So I'll show this tomorrow, wherein we will have a real Maven build. We will try to do one build wherein we will use the same repository, and we will try to do the build, and we will try to check in and submit it into the repository, and then see how this triggers automatically. Okay, but for now, just wait for 1 minute and see how it triggers. Okay, the last time it triggered was on 59:37, right? But now if you see, it would have changed at 8:1, but still it has not done. Why? Because it clearly says that the last version of the head or the last commit ID that has been put into the Git repository is the same thing. So there is no changes obtained. That is the reason it doesn't do anything with the content. Okay,
Yes.
is that clear?
Okay. Yes, yes.
Any
Great.
doubts?